It's not easy to make a big splash in the pickup truck world, but that's exactly what Ford wants to do by bringing back the 2019 Ford Ranger. So we thought it would be a good idea to put it up against the top seller in the midsize segment. So we've got Tacoma against the Ranger. I'm here with West Coast editor for Cars.com, Brian Wong. Brian, I want to give you some numbers, and then I want your impressions of these vehicles. We've got
Sounds good.
the Tacoma, the 3.5 liter V6, 278 horsepower, 265 foot-pounds of torque. The new Ranger only comes in a 4-cylinder, 2.3 liter EcoBoost, has a pretty good sized turbocharger, but it's 270 horsepower, 310 foot-pounds of torque. How did they drive on road?
Yeah, I think that the difference in torque really sticks out in favor of the Ranger. One of our long-term complaints about the Tacoma has really been the peakiness of that engine. But I found that the Ranger had a lot more even power delivery on-road, off-road, and it just made it more fun to drive overall.
Okay, so when we did canyon carving, we went up and over a few mountain ranges. Yeah. Which one was more fun to drive?
Oh, the Ford for sure. And that's because you didn't really have to put your foot in it to get it to go. It was a pretty willing participant from even mid-throttle.
Very quick throttle response. 10-speed transmission probably does a lot of good too. It's got a sport mode, but it has a very touchy almost throttle. So when you want to go, all you do is put your foot into it and you're gone.
Yeah, this Ford 10-speed automatic transmission has started to make its way into more and more Ford products as well as GM products, and I would say that it's done pretty well in pretty much all applications, and today it did everything that we could throw at it with, great vigor.
But I know there's a lot of Toyota guys out there screaming at us. What about the transmission button that you have to push to change the algorithm and formatting of the software in the transmission? That helps a lot. And then it's got a sport mode you can flip over. And instead of the thumb drive transmission you have on the Ford, you've actually got a shifter.
Yeah, the shifter to move through the gears on the Toyota is a much more, it's a preferred way to kind of do that. It feels more mechanical. You feel more in tune with the truck rather than just kind of using your thumb to flip through gears. But at the end of the day, I'm still taking the Ranger, I'm still taking that advantage in torque, and I'm still taking that very consistent throttle delivery, whether you're in a sport mode or not. So when you're just in drive, the Ranger is far better, and when you're in sport, I still think it edges it.
So more fun to drive, but how did it do during our fuel economy testing?
It's interesting because you would automatically kind of give the big advantage to the smaller engine, but in this case, they actually came out basically in a dead heat after our 270 or so mile drive that we did the other day on road. So you're not quite getting the advantage in fuel economy that you'd think from a 4-cylinder, but again, I think the performance kind of makes up for it.
So more fun to drive, gets fairly good fuel economy, but the V6 and the 4-cylinder do pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, and that's kind of what Toyota was going for with this V6, right? It kind of switches cycles on you. So it starts on the Atkinson cycle, which is more efficient, and I think that that's really how it's able to keep up with this truck in terms of fuel economy.
As you might expect, a lot of differentiation here in the interiors. This is the Ranger Lariat model, so we've got nicely contoured front seats, leather wrapped, also soft touches both in the center console, on the door so your elbows don't get roughed up, and also here on the dash itself. This is a softer material. It's not the hard plastic that we see on the XL or the XLT. Much more organic layout, more horizontal, nice big 8-inch color screen here for the navigation, and a lot of cubby spaces in the doors, also in the front, and cup holders here in the center.
Here in the back seat, the Ranger also differentiates itself from the Tacoma in a few key ways. The first is more charging options. The back of the Tacoma is very Spartan. No air vents for the backseat passengers, no even charging options. But here in the back of the Ford, you get 2 USB ports and a 110 volt 3-prong household outlet. Now that joins 2 USB ports up front and 2 more 12 volts up front so that you can keep all your devices charged in the Ranger, and that's something that modern people really need, especially those with kids. So if you're going to use this also as a family vehicle, that's a really important consideration. Also in the Ranger, back seat folds up and folds down. No storage behind the seat here, but underneath 2 decently sized cubbies for you to fit tools and other things that you really want to keep in the truck. Now, those charging ports are another way in which the Ranger interior really kind of leaps ahead of the Tacoma. That Sync multimedia system has Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, and just a cleaner overall user experience. Toyota really needs to update its multimedia system, and the Tacoma is no exception. So we started out with the interior of the Ranger, which is the one that I would say that we clearly like better. Toyota, no slouch in that department. We actually like the styling of this a lot. The dials and the whole dashboard here looks more rugged. Mark talked about the horizontal integration of the Ranger's dashboard. Toyota definitely more vertical. All of your controls get kind of stacked up here in the center console, and there's not a whole lot going on the right side of the cabin. It all really just focuses down to the center. Now, as we mentioned, screens definitely better in the Ford. It has those My Ford touchscreens in the instrument panel. It also has a larger touchscreen in the center console. Toyota, smaller touchscreen, but it's also missing connectivity options. No Android Auto, no Apple CarPlay, and the Toyota infotainment system is one that we've been asking them to update for years. So when they do get updated in their other vehicles, hopefully those changes do come to the next generation of the Tacoma. One thing to mention that it does do well, it has a large wireless charging pad. So if you have a smartphone with wireless charging, it's actually big enough to fit even the larger smartphones of today with a case on. So my phone fits in there fine. Not always the case in different vehicles. One other thing that we do like about the Toyota interior, this shift knob here, the shift action when you're doing up and down and locking out gears, much better than the thumb shifter that's on the Ranger. Mark, how about the back seat?
Yeah, the keyword back here is Spartan. Very limited in legroom, headroom a little bit more cramped than the Ranger. Also, no AC vents, no charging ports here in back. What they do offer is a little bit of storage under the seat. Bottom seat slips forward, and if you fold forward the seat backs, there's also some hidden storage back there as well. Here at the back of the trucks, not a lot of creativity, not a lot of complexity, but there are differences. What are you seeing between these two?
The most obvious difference is that we have a composite bed liner in the back of the Tacoma. We have a spray-in bed liner in the back of the Ranger, and this composite bed liner probably helps the Tacoma overall on weight, but it does have kind of a slippery floor that you don't really get with the Ranger. There is one thing about the Tacoma's bed that is heavier, and that would be the tailgate. So back here, steel. On the Ford, it is aluminum, and it's much easier to lift up. You can even do it with 2 or 3 fingers.
Now the Toyota tailgate is strutted, so it actually softly releases to the ground.
That it does, yeah.
But the Ranger does not have that option, but it is very light, so it's very easy to close, so that's wonderful. We also took these to the scale, the truck scales, and found out some very interesting details about payload.
Yeah, so you have a very big advantage in payload, overall payload for the Ranger. So that checks in at about 1,500 pounds of payload as we weigh it at the scale. For Tacoma, you're down around 1,000 pounds, and that's a 50% difference in payload between the two vehicles.
And very interesting, we found out that both of these vehicles are both crew cabs, both four-wheel drive, both 5-foot beds, weigh about the same thing, within 20 pounds of each other.
Yeah, really close in weight.
But since the GVW number is so much higher on the Ford, they get 500 pounds more payload capacity.
Yeah.
Maximum payload capacity, which is Super Cab 2-wheel drive version, is over 1,800 pounds, so way higher than anything Toyota, and for that matter, anything Colorado, Canyon, or Frontier can offer.
Right, and that will kind of be a big selling or detracting point for one of these trucks for consumers who are going to be hauling a lot of stuff. So if you're going to have to carry anything that's over 1,000 pounds, that immediately disqualifies the Tacoma for you and leaves you with the Ranger.
The last thing I want to make sure we talk about at the back of the trucks here, their rear axles. Very interesting strategy. Tacoma still has drum brakes. They both use monotube shocks, and a 4-leaf pack suspension in the Tacoma, but basically a 1-leaf package in the Ranger that still has more payload than anything else.
Yeah, it's impressive for what they're able to do.
We did get a chance to go play with these vehicles off-road, but we should note this is the top-level Ranger. It has the FX4 package, 4-wheel drive, but Toyota, we have the TRD Sport. There's still a TRD Off-Road and a TRD Pro level above that. So a fairly level comparison, but not identical. Brian, talk to me about how much fun we had, first of all, and then what technology in each of these vehicles kind of allowed that to happen?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that both of us were impressed by what each truck was able to accomplish. On the Toyota side, it's the TRD Sport, so it doesn't have Toyota's crawl control system, which we've enjoyed in the past. But even on a street tire, it was able to kind of handle everything that we threw at it, from a hill climb to going through ruts to even a rock crawling section. The suspension flex in the Tacoma and the amount of ease with which it's able to kind of traverse obstacles, very impressive for not their top level off-road truck. Now on the Ford side, it comes with trail control, their kind of version of crawl control, and much to the way that Ford has kind of endorsed it, it's quiet. Crawl control is kind of loud. You can hear all the mechanical linkages kind of working. On the Ford, you just slap it in there, take your foot off the gas, take your foot off the brake, and it crawls up with nary a sound. So it's a much quieter, it feels like a much smoother system, except for in one instance, and that would be rock crawling. So for some reason, the trail control system on the Ford, kind of when you get over a rock or when you get over a lip, it gives you like a little bit of rock back. And it's very disconcerting when you're on a trail and you're trying to get over something and be smooth, to have the system feel like it's going to rock back on you. At a certain point, I kind of just took control and I was like, you know, the trail control is doing real well. I think I can do a little bit better. And I don't know if I've ever had that feeling with crawl control.
Yeah, no, we've both have had a lot of experience with Toyota's crawl control, and although we've always and constantly are commenting about how noisy it is when you know those brakes are going on and off. The trail control, much smoother, much quieter, more organic almost as it kind of climbs over those obstacles. But yeah, you're exactly right. In those situations where we were going up the steep grades and that throttle wasn't quite enough to keep that vehicle locked down, it almost was as if it was prevented from using the brakes to keep it from rolling backwards. It got a little rolling backwards, in some cases maybe even a foot or maybe more than a foot before the throttle kicked in and actually brought that back up to speed, and you held your ground, and then eventually the traction found its way forward.
And maybe we've been overly, I guess, critical might be the word, about crawl control and its noises, because I think that there is some comfort in hearing the traction control and hearing the brakes work in concert so well with the powertrain on the Toyota. And then on the Ford, we got there, we're like, oh, we don't want sound. Well, maybe that's not the best, you know, the grass isn't always greener on the other side.
Recommendations that we obviously have for anybody thinking about these vehicles. First thing you want to think about is putting a good off-road, maybe all-terrain tire if you're going to do any off-roading. But secondly, maybe wait for the Ford Ranger Raptor. We keep hearing rumors about that coming down the road. That can't be very difficult to make.
No, I think that's coming, and I think that if you're going to do some real serious off-roading in the Ranger, that might be the one to wait for. But I will say this, the FX4 was really impressive on dirt. So kind of how the Raptor has made its name as a dirt runner, the FX4 does a very good impression. We took it over some washes at 30, 40 miles an hour. Suspension felt very stable. That powertrain, really responsive, easy to manipulate the throttle through corners, so you can kind of get the tail to swing out a little bit, as we did a few times. Great fun in the wash.
Yeah, Ford engineers have dialed in this suspension both on pavement and for all sorts of off-road use, which we experienced today.
Yeah, I think that the Ranger it drives really well, and I think that that's something you could say about it both on-road, which we experienced yesterday, and off-road, which we experienced today. And that's a really big compliment to pay for a truck, especially something in this segment where there are other trucks that don't necessarily drive as well in one condition or the other.
So there you have just some of our thoughts about some very specific categories about how these two trucks compare with one another. But we have no doubt if this new Ranger is going to do this well against the top seller, consumers are very likely to respond well too. For more details and to find out who won our competition, go to pickuptrucks.com.